My name is Michael Goldberg. I'm the executive director of our Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship and a professor at the Weatherhead School of Management. And we're thrilled to bring together colleagues across the university that are working on really exciting commercialization and innovation activities in different schools. I've known Darcy Freedman for a long time, and as well as Ken Laparo and Drew Adams I've met more recently. And we're so pleased that our Veale Institute entrepreneur in residence and colleague Al Green, who has a deep background working on campuses such as Case Western Reserve University, but also in the private sector. And Al's been doing a lot of work with us on our campus and thinking about commercialization. So Al will lead today's discussion. We'd love these to be interactive. So if you're with us on Zoom, please let us know either by raising your hand or putting a comment in the chat that you want to join. If you're on LinkedIn Live, and just put a comment a note in the comment box in LinkedIn, and Doug and I will make sure that we feed it into Al. So with that, thank you to my colleagues, and over to you, Al, to run the show.
Great. Well, listen, folks, it's a real pleasure to be with you all today, and thanks for joining, folks, taking out of your busy schedule. Many of you I've met before, some I haven't. But let me give a 2-second snapshot of what this is about. Essentially, I've had the privilege of working in higher ed, talking to a lot of faculty and researchers and graduate students that are very much interested in the technology translation activity. There's a lot of really common themes that come out. And one of those themes really is that the technology commercialization journey is a tough one. And the faculty members will typically say, had I known this or that or whatever. Universities try to address this in various ways. At Case right now, we're actually thinking about ways that we can more institutionalize some of the knowledge that comes from faculty and staff that are trying to commercialize stuff. But one of the easiest ways is that faculty that have gone through this journey kind of share that with others. And so probably about 5 or 6 months ago, we had a conversation with the Veale folks saying, we should have a panel of faculty that have, gone through some sort of commercialization. It's really sharing knowledge and background and so on and so forth. I've gone through a little bit of that myself when I was a CEO of a company called Kent Displays for a dozen years also. So the format here is I'm going to start by asking the panelists, Darcy, Ken, and Drew, to give a brief intro. And then what I'd like to do is these sessions are always the most effective if people are asking questions. It's really it's the most fun for everyone if audience members are asking questions and the panelists can answer and we have a dialogue back and forth. So that's kind of how I'd like to do this if possible. So why don't we start with Darcy, with you, and a little bit of an intro and a little bit of your commercialization experiences.
Sure. So hi there. Good afternoon. I'm Darcy Freedman. I'm a professor in the Department of Population and Quantitative Health Sciences in the School of Medicine. And I'm also the director of the Marianne Swetland Center for Environmental Health. So I came to Case Western in 2013. So a little bit of the story. And I remember when I was interviewing at Case, my former department chair, who was like 85 years old, by the way, he told me the story of, and he was like a renowned genetic epidemiologist, and I'm a community psychologist. So I was thinking, what do we have in common? And he said, I grew up in Scotland and all I ever wanted to do was be a farmer, but I couldn't get a job. I couldn't get land to farm. And so I had to come to the United States and go to college and become the renowned, genetic epidemiologist of the world. But he's saying all I ever really wanted to do was be a farmer. So he was really interested in a lot of the work that I was doing around nutrition incentive programs. So how do you expand, dollars available to people receiving government food assistance like SNAP or food stamps to maximize the amount of fruits and vegetables they can purchase. And so he said in the interview, if people that we recruit to Case Western, we really want them to commercialize something. And I thought, wow, okay, well, what do I have that I would commercialize? But it put the bug in my head because I developed paper and pencil versions of all of these tracking systems of how do you track utilization of this fairly complicated program at farmers markets. And it was sort of this window of opportunity where a big federal policy passed, these kinds of programs were going to become available nationwide. And it was clear that in order for those to be effective in the communities that needed them the most, we had to provide support in terms of tracking and evaluation of the programs, because it's a monetary incentive. If you make a mistake, somebody has to pay for it. And the places that, again, need it the most, they might not be willing to take the risk of, potentially losing track of $1 or 10 or 100. And so that became the process of creating FM Tracks. It's an iOS-based app and website that's used now in about 600 or up to 1,000 in one of our higher years, farmers markets in about 30 states across the United States. And I was just on a call earlier today to get to the point of why, had I known, and I really knew nothing about technology. I was not a person who even used apps at the time. And I still don't really use a lot of apps. So I didn't know what I was getting into. I knew the problem. I knew what the solution could be. And I remember talking with the folks I was working with. That's the most important thing. Like, do you understand how this works? And then the other side as an academic is, you have a lot of credibility. I mean, I was publishing a lot of research in this area. I was respected. But what we ultimately, the reason why we do what we do, and I'd say we commercialize for social good, how do we make sure that a product like this is available for anybody anywhere? And that means it has to have a price, because I can't continue to pay for it on a grant. There's no sustainability in that. And when I have a conversation with people in Ohio or at the USDA, and they tell me, and even today, somebody told me, we're able to advocate for this because of these data. We're able to, prioritize change because of these data. I mean, that's really why I do keep, the work, and it is a lot of work, but I do kind of stay engaged in further developing that technology.
Thank you, Darcy. Ken, you're next up on my screen here.
On your Hollywood Squares?
On my Hollywood Squares.
Right. Thanks, Al. So Ken Laparo, I'm a faculty member in the Department of Electrical, Computer, and Systems Engineering. I've been at Case for now, it's over 40 years, actually. And I currently serve as the faculty director for ISACS, which is the Institute for Smart, Secure, and Connected Systems, and also the co-academic director of the IoT Collaborative, which is a unique partnership between Case Western Reserve University and Cleveland State University that is all around the industrial Internet of Things. And it's been supported by the Cleveland Foundation for the last 4 years. My journey is a little bit different than Darcy's. I started my career in industry before I ended up going back to get a PhD and ended up in a university setting. And so I always understood or had a pretty deep appreciation for the fact is that there is a distinct difference between invention and innovation. Invention is what many of us do in our labs. And that is that we have a sort of a pet idea or something that we think is meaningful. We go into the lab and so we sort of develop this technology, and then It's like you have a hammer and now you need to go out and find out a nail that you can hit with that hammer. And that's a very ineffective way of making contributions, and in particular in technology translation or commercialization. The approach that I sort of came on to early on, and I was at a research center at a very large corporation, and all the business units came to us with problems that they were having, and everything that we did was innovation based. That there was a problem that was out there, and whether or not it took basic and fundamental research, or it was just a matter of integrating commercial off-the-shelf technologies in unique ways to solve these problems, was how we approached them and what we did. When I then came to the university and spent the early parts of my career getting grant funding from the National Science Foundation, from the National Institutes of Health, all on basic research, I began to look at how could I now re-engage with industry and my industry partners in order to build a broader industry network that would be a source of challenges and problems that I could bring to my students, to my postdocs, into my lab, in order to figure out how could we use our energy and our expertise in order to solve something that was important to somebody else but just me. And so I always, sort of told my friends out in industry, this can go one of two ways. I've got to find problems and theses, problems for my students. So either I'm going to make something up that seems kind of interesting, or you can suggest something that's a challenge for you that you're struggling with, that is not something that's an immediate need, but something that has a longer term horizon for which students and faculty can actively engage. And through industry university partnerships with federal funding that's out there that is putting more and more dollars into industry university engagements over all areas of science and engineering, and I think policy and even the social sciences, bringing together people that have the problems with those people that have the ideas and can innovate to solutions. And I'll just sort of close with one sort of thought. What I have found is that most of this is all about relationships. Mm-hmm. It's really all about building trust and relationships with the people that you want to collaborate with, the people out in industry. That's slow going. It doesn't happen over a week or a month. It may take a long period of time. It's a slow boil, but what I have found is once you've gotten yourself into a position where you've got and built good relationships with a large number of industrial partners, that your ability to be successful, your ability to be able to innovate on technology and transfer and translate that technology is much greater.
No, thank you. There's much to unpack with what you said. I'll make some comments after Drew goes. Drew?
Thanks, Al. I'm Drew Adams. I'm an assistant professor in the genetics department here in the School of Medicine. And before that, my training was in organic chemistry and then in chemical biology. And together, these are kind of the core techniques that are applied for drug discovery. And so I started my lab in 2015 to really try to do academic drug discovery here in the School of Medicine, and also to kind of forge interdisciplinary collaborations in the school. So to bring what I can do in terms of drug discovery expertise with real disease matter experts here in the school. And so where we've made the most progress so far was with Paul Tizar, my actual in the office next door here in genetics, who's a real expert in the biology of multiple sclerosis. And so we were able to collaborate and work together and identify small molecules we believe have the ability to promote the repair of the damage to the brain that occurs in multiple sclerosis patients. And then in particular, using kind of my background, understanding how these small molecules work, exactly what proteins in the cell these molecules bind to have their potentially therapeutic effects. And so after a couple of years of working on that together, we realized we were at a point where we had molecules we thought had legs to move forward toward patients. We had a really important disease state and problem. and we had real biological knowledge and these novel targets to pursue. And so we kind of reached a point where we couldn't, I think Darcy referred to this as well, like we just recognized we needed greater scale if we're going to attack this problem and potentially maximize the impact for MS patients. We simply needed additional scale. We couldn't do this on grants. It just wasn't tractable. And so we began to pursue a startup creation approach, and ultimately we were able to launch a company called Veale Therapeutics, which is still based here in Cleveland in the bioenterprise just across Cedar from Case Western. And we were initially supported by a very generous group of Cleveland-based investors who got us going. And later in 2019, we were able to strike a research collaboration option to acquire agreement with Genentech Roche, a major global leader in pharma innovation. So now Veale has been able to grow. We have about 15 employees located at the bioenterprise site. I think one of the really interesting outcomes of this whole experience has been, the ability of this company to grow and to have a really incredible training experience for this set of scientists inside the company, learning from these, real global leaders in pharmaceutical development. Hopefully that can seed additional new companies and startups here in Cleveland in the near future.
Great. No, thank you, Drew. So maybe I'll just start off with a couple of comments. Again, really great intros. Lot to again unpack with what you all said. Ken, you made the comment about patents and so on, and there are two things that I always say to faculty that I'm talking about technology commercialization. The first is that just because something is patentable doesn't mean that it should be patented. And one of the things that I always run into typically with high-end researchers is that it's there's an innovation and then it's a knee-jerk to patent something. And the patent it may or may not be necessary. It may be know-how, it may be trade secrets or whatever, but that's one of the first things is to recognizing the difference of patentable and patenting. And the second thing, which is a really tough thing, is that, for researchers, which I consider myself, I'm a physicist by training. So, we tend to really fall in love with our technologies. Because we're good at it. We're good at developing great technologies. And one of the first things I said to my scientists that were working at Kent Displays at the time was, nobody cares about your technology. And it's really a tough pill, but no one cares about your technology. What they care about is how you're going to make them a hero. And what you have to switch the conversation from, here's my great technology, to here's how you benefit from whatever the output of my technology is. That's some of the lessons learned. But if I could just sort of say, if in your case, Drew, and then I'll pose the same question to Darcy. In the journey that you went through, Case, I think, has a relatively strong ecosystem, or it's developing a strong ecosystem around medicine and the life sciences when it comes to commercialization. I think other areas are not quite as strong, but if you look back at your experience, what do you wish you would have known? Or is there something you could say, I wish I would have done this differently? Then I'm going to come and ask Darcy the same question.
I think this gets back to the opening comments of just how hard it was going to be and over what period of time, right? Because we've been working on this, starting from the initial seed of the idea. I was just thinking today, it's been 5 years, right? So, that was 2 years sort of incubated in the lab side, and then a year of sort of transition, and a couple of years now on the Veale side. So, really requires that dedicated effort over a long period of time. I think also, one of the challenges I didn't realize, but also I think one of the most rewarding aspects of the journey, as you put it, is sort of how many different types of expertise you'll need along the way, and how many really interesting and inspiring people you'll meet who will sort of fill those needs as you recognize that you need them. So we've been really, really lucky to find folks when needs emerged who really fit the bill, and I'm really kind of just grateful in retrospect that we were able to network, and by hook or by crook or however we did it, find the right people to help us move forward.
One of the things that you talked about, Drew, that was really important and interesting is, you started with a problem, yet there was a problem. And so when you were smart enough to get this a potential solution, you had a great hammer, but you knew what the nail was. And what Ken was saying is that a lot of times, particularly in, engineering and the natural sciences, you end up with a great hammer and an idea of where the nail is, but not really. And that's where so many companies and entrepreneurs kind of get tripped up. But Darcy, if I could ask you, as you look on your journey, what would you have done differently? Or what do you wish you would have known going into this?
I didn't know a lot going into it, so everything was a learning process. But I think that, one thing when I started, so because that huge policy passed, there were a lot of people in the fight, if you will, trying to create what FM Tracks is. And there was this sense of competition and who's going to be the one. And I actually wished that we weren't the winner. I thought we would just get an idea out there. I am actually shocked that FM Tracks is still like the premier tool. And so maybe I had this idea that I'm just going to make something and then give it to somebody else to take it over. And what I found is that, back to that idea of trusting relationships, people actually want us to still stay in the game, because I think we have very solid quality product. It works well, we understand. And so I guess what I wish I would have known is that, you're now endeavoring on a, decade long or whatever. I mean, I thought I was doing like a small project and what maybe I would have structured things differently. We're now at a pivot point, I would say, in FM Tracks, where we're beginning another round of potentially major innovation on the technology, which is actually fairly large. But part of the hesitancy, because we're for social good, we basically invest all the money we get on the licensing of the technology. So, where's the revenue to do another round of, big update? But we're, I think I could benefit, from what would a new formulation of a sort of business model of it look like. But we're, I think what we've learned is we're now a fairly well-respected tool, and people want us to advance it somewhat. Because now, people have been using it 5 years, and data is your commodity. They have so much data that they want to use in really, cool ways and things like that. So, yeah, I guess that you could actually your thing could work. And I think the story narrative was, really, it's very unlikely that your thing will work. Because, most of the time it doesn't. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, that's really good. Ken, I'll ask one more question. I'd love to see some questions from the audience here. But you mentioned it's 40 plus years for you at the university, so you've gone through this cycle, more than once. So can you speak to the importance of students in this equation? The backdrop for this is that as I talk to faculty, they all continue to come back and emphasize the importance of the students and the physical journey, and essentially this conveyor belt of students that are in your group may graduate and leave and then come back and have a startup or whatever. But can you talk a little bit about the importance of students?
Well, sure. I think when you sort of when we talk about technology transfer or technology development, I think that we always have to remember what the major goal of the university is, and it is education. Mm-hmm. And so even though I know that, there's a lot of discussion out there about, technology transfer for licensing and bringing in revenue, I think that's icing on the cake. The cake is really the students and the journey that the students go through in this process. And that very often, I think, we forget about why we're actually at the university and what the mission and our role is. And anything, in my view, anything that excludes the students, either at the undergraduate level, at the graduate level, or even at the postdoctoral or research level, from these kinds of experiences and innovations that we're trying to do shouldn't be done at the university then. And maybe the right place to do them is spin it out into a company, and then the objectives, the mission are completely different. And then the issues are not commingled and confused. And so when I approach and I've built a number of products for industry that are out there that are doing extremely, extremely well. And I'm glad they're doing well. And not that it made much of a difference to me, but it certainly made a big difference to them. And all I ask of them in return is to continue to invest and be interested in my lab and my students and what I'm trying to do. And I think that is a key message that, in these industry university engagements and discussions, that, getting the right mix of how industry feeds back to the university in successful implementations of technology or innovations within their business space needs to be, I think, rethought and needs to be, maybe reinvigorated in terms of, it's not just about a license and it's not just about royalties. There are other ways in which industry can support and invest in the university, which are very congruent with its mission.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ken. One of the questions I'd like to pose to the panelists, again, on this, thinking through your commercialization journey, universities in general have organizations that are intent to help the faculty researcher and to get their ideas out. And in the case, there's many different mechanisms. One of those is the tech transfer office, where the tech transfer office can take a patent and hopefully match it with a need in the marketplace. I'd like to start with you, Drew, on this question. Did you find that process to be smooth or not smooth, or hiccups, or just if you could speak openly to the group?
Yeah, so when we started, so we did have some IP filings and maybe one issued patent at that point, and so we were thinking about needing a license from the university for a startup to move forward. So this is really our first rodeo, and so we didn't know what to expect. I think what we found was it's just very inherently complex, these licensing discussions. It's inherently conflict of interest prone, because the university is trying to represent my best interest as a faculty member. But, I'm excited about this idea and its potential to impact real patients. That requires getting a company, which requires a license. And so I'm on both sides of the fence here trying to move this forward. So it was very challenging. I think, it took a long time, took a matter of 6 months of sort of constant negotiation, a lot of back and forth, a lot of legal involvement. I think we, along the way, learned to sort of communicate more person to person, and getting people in a room, and was ended up being a lot more productive than lawyers redlining back and forth, and probably a lot cheaper. So I think that was one of the main kind of turning points, allowed us to move forward and ultimately get to a successful deal.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. When we used to do agreements with other companies, what I found the best way to do it is have the principals agree on what they want to do and then hand it over to the lawyers, as opposed to the other way around, because I think that sometimes the interests are not as aligned. So, but Darcy, can you comment on your experience with how the tech transfer process worked?
Yeah, I would say a very similar, a lot of, and they did work with us on like the main things, like no legalese, like what are the main things that you want? And we're all going to agree on this. Do we all agree? And then when we got to that point, then we brought in all that other language, and that still took a while to get it signed. I think that one of the things that was helpful was also just thinking about strategy around and again, what we have is very different than something that could potentially make a lot of money. This is not something that's going to make a lot of money. We're trying to fund it to sustain. Was also like, what's an innovative funding model? So for example, the way we license is, it's like, if you only want 25 licenses, you're going to pay a lot more than if, you want 200 or more. And so like just being creative to try and, figure out what are the price points that we need to be able to cover key costs, things like that. And also just thinking about, and this kind of to the patent, we don't have a patent, we have, IP, but what are the derivative products? And then when do you, define out like a derivative and things like that? And, sometimes, I still wonder sometimes, was it even worth it to go through that? Because the conflict of interest thing, for example, like every single paper, I have to now put this statement in that seems like such a red flag, but it's not at all, but it just feels like and I do all these like forms and annual reports on conflict of interest. Sometimes that can I don't know, it's not, especially when what I think the conflict is very low, but I do a lot of reporting on conflict of interest.
Yeah. I've heard that before, and also have experienced that. Ken, can you make a couple comments on that? I'd love to see some more questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think that the tech transfer process can be complicated.
Yeah,
and especially if it is a technology that has been developed in isolation at the university, and now you want to try to go out and find, is there somebody that would be interested? And so very often the question comes back that, well, who might I try to license this to? I kind of say, well, I knew that. I would just sort of go out and do it, right? I don't know. That's the issue. I came about this problem in the wrong way. I came about it from, to use an analogy, Al, that we've talked about before, I came about it by pushing this thing up the hill rather than somebody at the top with a rope pulling the ideas out of me and pulling my technology into an area where they know there's a winner and they're the logical candidate to help move it forward. And I can say that in a number of instances that I've licensed technology, and some of this has been things that I've done outside of the university, is that I always thought I'm going to go with the biggest company that I can find that is interested in this, and I found that to be a huge mistake.
Yeah, I was going
that it got lost in a large portfolio, and years went by of neglect and not really paying attention, and it wasn't just a patented idea. It was actually a technology platform that we handed them to go do something additional with, and I think much to maybe the way that sort of Drew is working in terms of, a NUCO or a startup, is that we finally decided that the only way to make this happen is you have to do it yourself, because otherwise it kind of does get lost in a large portfolio with a lack of attention. So if you don't have the right customer in mind in the beginning, the process can end in a very dissatisfying way.
Yeah. Now I want to, the one thing that I want to pick up a theme that you were talking about, and that was, the importance of, you were talking about relationships, and I would say, one step more, the importance of, talking to the marketplace to find out what some of the real problems are. And I'm going to pick on Larry Sears for a minute, where, one of the things that Larry and I have talked about a lot is the importance of faculty actually striking up consulting relationships where they learn more about the problems. And the phrase that Larry said, which I've used many times now, Larry, as you said, it's a lot easier to walk into a corporation with an oscilloscope rather than with your hand out, you know. And I think that that's really important, because faculty getting a understanding what the nails are before you break out your favorite hammer is a good way to start, you know. But while I've got Larry off the mute for a second, if you could just say a little bit more about that, and even give a snapshot. I've always been fascinated with your commercialization story, but if you could say a few more words about that, I think it'd be great, Larry.
Yeah. Whoa.
Oh, you've got two on, so yeah.
All right. Hold on a second. Let's try this one.
Yeah, that's better.
Is that better?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, as one of our board members put it, faculty consulting is the gateway drug to sponsored research. We've got to keep in mind that our potential customers for our technology cover, really an expanse of companies. You have small local companies, you have huge, multinational companies here and there. And so there's a lot of opportunities. And a good way to get your foot in the door is that you a faculty member could try to solve some problems, some real world problems that a company might have. And a faculty consultant provides an opportunity to sort of give it a quick look, give it a feasibility test. Is this something that is worth some, additional research? And then of course you could bring it in and, in a formal program and sponsor graduate students and all that. But I really think that a good way to get these things off the ground is to get our faculty out there using the relationships a couple of people have mentioned are so important, and provide some very, very good sort of very preliminary research, and perhaps ferret some of these ideas out of the lab and bring them to the forefront. Traditionally, I know, decades ago, CASE was very, very strong at this, but there have been some obstacles in terms of conflict of interest, in terms of just lack of our, frankly, our research technology group sort of looking favorably on faculty consulting, and sometimes it gets pushed underground a little bit more than it should. So I think it's an opportunity that's out there. I think we have to be very careful with conflict of commitment and conflict of interest, but I still think it's a great opportunity to, not only provide a little bit of income for faculty, but also to eventually lead to some, pretty exciting sponsored research and partnerships and spin-outs and that type of thing. So I would like to see faculty consulting being promoted.
Great. Thanks, Larry. We've got some questions coming in. So I'm going to start with Ashley. If you could come off of mute and ask your question, or if you want me to read it, but if you could ask, and then after that, I'd like to go to Rahaf. Is that how I pronounce it? Oh,
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay. So Ashley, can you go first, if you would, or do you want me to read your question?
Sorry, I can do it.
Okay, thank you.
So as individuals, students have sort of the least amount of power at the university. And so if a student has an idea that they would like to push forward, how can they find the resources they need at the university and also protect themselves so that they're given the credit that's due to them?
So let's see. Who on the panel would like to take the first shot at that one?
I could take that.
Okay.
And we have a very clear sort of protocol on these, and that is, as an undergraduate, with very, very few exceptions, what you come up with is your own. It's as simple as that. If you have a summer job at a company or something, that might be a little bit different, or some kind of sponsored research. But if you have an idea on your own, even though you're using university facilities, that idea remains yours. And indeed, we have Bob Sopko as someone who could, who exists to very much help you with our LaunchNet program. So,
which is aimed at undergraduates
which is
primarily.
specifically aimed at undergraduate, and also the ThinkBox environment. If you go to the website, there is a statement someplace where we clarify all this. So, LaunchNet is the way to go, and there's really no hindrance on your activities.
Great, thank you. Can we go to Rahaf? Yes, yes, yes.
Can I chime in too?
Yes,
so
please.
There's a cool program in the School of Medicine that's launched in the past couple of years, might be just worth flagging. So it's more at the graduate and postdoc level, but a program, I actually don't know the name, sorry, but to connect people who are working, students and postdocs who are working on promising translational projects with sort of entrepreneurship resources, forging connections and getting sort of a sustained mentorship model over a 1 to 2 year kind of time horizon to try to, provide input about the technology, how to advance it, but also build sort of soft skills of how to get a pitch deck together and how to communicate in these meetings and things like that. So at the more senior levels, I think the university is recognizing that often it is the student who graduates and then wants to continue this, but in the NUCO or in some sort of other relationship, and trying to foster those skills during the training period.
No, thank
Drew,
you.
I just put a link to it. It's the Translational Fellows program. So I put a link to that, and it's good timing actually. They're recruiting their next class. So this is for I don't know, Ashley, if you're an undergraduate student or a graduate student, but this is for graduate and postdoc students are eligible.
I think also, Al, if I'll just sort of chime in also and sort of complement what Larry said. I think that when you look at the resources that are available for entrepreneurial activities, they're really much greater for the student body than for the faculty. And so Ashley, you should take advantage of all of them, because there are tons of resources out there and opportunities. I think where the university, I think, also needs to think about focusing is, and I think Larry began to sort of formulate that in terms of consulting as a way of getting faculty engaged with industry in ways that can help them formulate ideas. But I think the entrepreneurial activities for faculty are much weaker than for students.
Thank you. So I'm getting a lot of great questions from the audience. So I think next is Rahaf, and I believe I see Bob Pavey. So Bob, if you're still there, I think it'd be great if you can. This question is about investors, and it would be great if maybe you could actually help in fielding this question. So Rahaf, if you could come off of mute and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing your experiences. First of all, it was very helpful. And I was wondering what you all think are the most important elements to include in a funding model that will appeal to investors.
Bob, can you speak to that?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, so investors are people, and what appeals to one won't appeal to another. So there is no simple answer, I'm sorry to say. It's you almost have to step back and say, in this country, there are 500,000 businesses formed every year by all sorts of people, faculty, students, you name it. There are 50,000 of them that raise money from angel investors, and there are a few thousand that raise venture capital, and it's all different. So but for the entrepreneur, it's a little like getting married. You're bringing somebody in to own part of your company through an investment, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to them, and you got to make sure you can work with them. So I've been doing this a long time. Most venture capitalists look at 100 projects for every one they fund, maybe more. So your job is to talk to a lot of people, back to the point that was made earlier, meet a lot of people, find somebody that you really can relate to, that can help you. And then the funding will be part of selling some stock. But back to who can help, we now have the Veale Center, right, Michael? And originally Al said that TechTran was there to help, but they were also there to negotiate. So now we've got an office set up at the university to help people who want to start businesses, whether it's faculty or students. And you ought to be calling Michael.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll put my cell phone in the chat. Call me anytime.
I should have prefaced by saying that Bob is a venture capitalist. That's why I called on him, who I know from other things. The one thing I would add also to the Rahaf's question is, I was happy to participate or to be in the audience of an earlier session about faculty entrepreneurship, and one of the things that they stressed over and over is really investors invest in people. The technology part is important. It's the people side, and after there was a book that one of the persons wrote, and they talked about the characteristics of great leaders, which are so important to startups, and it was integrity, tenacity, IQ/EQ, deep market awareness, and gravitas. Those were some of the traits that when investors are looking for when they're about to make an investment. But I see, let's see, let me try. Let me try to read through some of these. There's a question coming from the audience asking about what are some of the strategies that the panelists have used to navigate various barriers to commercialization that they've encountered? So let me go to Darcy to field that one.
I think so. One of the strategies that we had in the beginning, I'll say, was, we through the tech transfer office, they were really saying, hey, you should try and get an exclusive license with this one group. And that was going to be, because it was, they sort of pushed that. I was learning as we're going. Well, what became clear is they did not want an exclusive license because it was actually a higher price to be, if you're the exclusive, and they didn't want to do that. So it ended up actually being much better for us. We have a lot more power in a non-exclusive, we can work with anybody at anywhere. And so I think that was a good lesson, is actually for what we were doing, non-exclusive was a good thing. And it gave us sort of kept control in the work that we're doing, and to work with any of the partners, like as a new one comes up, it could be a competitor of the other, and we can still work with them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. One of the things that you find with companies that want to partner, particularly large companies, the entry line is they want exclusivity. And my response was always to say, you can have exclusivity. You just have to buy up all of my stock, all of my stock by the products that we have. Then you can have a default exclusivity, because exclusivity is expensive, and I think that it should be treated as such. That whole question. Okay, we've got a question. Let me just look here. Back to the discussion again on to how case and tech transfer can really work. I'd like to ask the three panelists, if you could be as tight as you can in response, just what case and TTO, tech transfer office, can really do to make your journey easier. If you guys could comment on that quickly. Thanks. And I'll start with Drew.
I think that what we learned about communication and just sort of getting people in the room and forcing the sides to talk directly would be one. And I think also just exploring potential models that other institutions have used, I think to some effect, that are more simplified and streamlined, and sort of startup in a box kind of concept, and trying to apply those to the extent possible. I realize that all deals are different, but at least where possible, using those streamlined models, I think, can make it faster.
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about in another activity that I've been working on is that, I don't think you start with you want to have existing licensing templates. Template doesn't have everything in it because it's going to be different, but you start with a template. So you start with a position of where you're talking at least on the same planet. And because a lot of times you start on different planets and it takes you 6 months to get on the same planet. So yeah. Darcy, can you make a comment on what you think would have made your journey easier from TTO and case? How they could have...
one thing that's coming to my mind is just quick money. So a lot of times in this, like if you're used to writing grants, I write a grant for my idea today, it's going to get reviewed in 4 months. It's going to be 4 more months. 12 more months later, I'm starting a project. That's not how innovation works, right? It's very fast. So actually the tech transfer office was able to give us an initial, loan or whatever they called it. We had to pay it back, but I think having in like rapid response, like quick capital opportunities to innovate. And then the other side, I would say, is like sort of an interim between what Drew has started his own company. I mean, I think it's great. CASE allows, like, I think 51% of your time can go or be CASE, and then the other at your company or something like that. But what's an interim of you don't want to start a company, but you maybe need a little bit more support than what would be a company, like, to kind of grow up the product or whatever you're developing for a period of time. And maybe it's not going to be a long haul. So like, what is that like more agile business space for periods of time that you need more, human capital, I guess, around the table?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's great. For those of you that have heard my tech integrator pitch, please listen to what Darcy just said. That's one of the elements that we think is really important. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if I could just ask Ken, I'm going to circle back to you. Just if you could give us some sort of wrap up comments, and then I'm going to hand it to Michael to see us.
Sure.
Done. So make some comments just from your 40 years of experience, Ken.
Sure. So I think that, the university provides a great infrastructure for innovation and for technology opportunities. I think it's up to each individual to understand where their strengths are and how they can take most advantage of what those opportunities are that are out there. I do agree with what Larry said relative to the idea of engaging with industry, and the pace of engagement with industry is very, very different from the way that you engage in research with a federal agency, where the quanta of time are semesters and years.
Right.
Very often for industry, it's days and weeks. And we as a university stumble and fall all over ourselves because we don't know how do I get 3 hours of Darcy's time next week, and how do I deal with that? And we haven't sort of figured out how we create flexible and very dynamic procedures and policies that allow us to take advantage of every opportunity that's out there that we think is of value and is aligned with the mission of the university. And if it's not aligned with the mission of the university, then, tell me that this is not, and very often I say, look, the company has approached me and want me to do this. Now, I can go outside and I can do it. I'd like to do it inside. Is this something you would like to figure out how to do? And if you do, I'm willing to work with you and we'll figure out how to make it happen. But we have to make it happen, and we have to do it quickly, because all of these things, especially if you're dealing with small and medium-sized companies, if you wait 2 days, it's gone. I mean, I'm on to something else. I got another catastrophe and fire that's burning. And so I think that we really need to be more agile. And if there's opportunities we want to go be after, don't let policy and procedure be the stopping point. It should be the facilitator.
Yeah, figure out how you can do it rather than
exactly.
Just say no. Yeah,
yeah. Don't tell me no.
Yeah.
Say, here's a better way to do it.
Here's a better way. Yeah.
Correct.
So, you all, I really do appreciate everyone and your great questions here on this. I promise that next time I'm going to pick on you, Joe Keithley, because I always like to hear your commercialization story, and many people would like to hear it here also. So, but I'm going to hand it back to Michael to finish this off. And thanks again for everyone for your comments and questions.
Great. Al, thank you for moderating. It was wonderful to have you host this conversation. Drew, Darcy, and Ken, thanks for everything. Thanks for sharing your honest feedback and sort of stories in the commercialization journey. I think it's really incredibly helpful.